What is up, everybody? Today I'm doing a new tutorial series in Unity where we're going to go through the very basics of Unity and programming in C#. We're going to be making this very simple game where you run a restaurant, you run around, and you grab food for people before they get mad. And you got mad, so game over. But we'll make that a little easier. But yeah, so we're going to run through the very basics. It seems like a simple game, but we're going to be going through the very basics of programming so you guys can get the fundamentals down and then hopefully be able to make your own games after this. I tried to pick a game that will show a lot of different features and techniques and things like that that you will need to make your own games. Me personally, learning Unity was really tough. It was my first programming language with C#, and I got stuck in that tutorial trap. So I know how it feels, and I understand how difficult it can be. So I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible for you guys. We're going to be running from the very beginning, very basics. If you've never touched Unity before, we're going to be going all the way up to even some more intermediate to advanced topics. It's going to be fun. Programming games is one of the most fun things to do. Programming, and it's not too bad once you get the hang of it, and then you can make whatever you like. I made a few different games. You can check them out, links in the description. But yeah, very cool stuff. Obviously the scene doesn't look pretty. And the models we won't be modeling anything. I'll have those assets ready to go for you guys. We're just gonna be mostly focusing on the programming part. It's more of a programming tutorial than anything. I won't worry about too much about how it looks and things like that. But yeah, so what you'll want to do if you've never downloaded Unity, you'll just go to Unity's website, unity.com. Click Get Started, and then you can just do the personal version. If you want to do a student version, if you have a student email, you can do that through GitHub, and that's really nice. You get like the dark theme. That's what I have, so it's very useful. But yeah, so go ahead and download that. Once you download it, you'll open up to this page here. And on your installs, I'm using 2019.4.3. Anything around there, anything in 2019 or even 2018, 2020 when it comes out should be fine. You don't need Android, iOS support unless you want to make games with those in the future. You can always add them on. But we will be using that for this tutorial. So yeah, and then you can just click new. Call it whatever you want. I'll just say tutorial project. And then just store in whatever folder you'd like here, and we're gonna be making a 3D game, and yeah, I think that's about it. So we'll just click create, it'll load it up, and yeah, we can see what's going on here. Okay, so when you first open your game, it's gonna look like this, or actually it won't. I'm just kidding. It will look like this. This is how you open your view up, and you can move around these windows and resize them, things like that. And you start out with just this window. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through and kind of list off everything and show you what everything is, what it does, and then we'll rearrange the windows to make it a little easier to do stuff with, in my opinion. But yeah, so over here we have our hierarchy, and then this is our scene view. So these work together. Because everything in your scene view is actually in your hierarchy. So as you see, we have a camera, and then we also have a directional light. And we can add stuff. If we click this plus button, we can add a 3D object, and say we add a cube. And now the cube's in the hierarchy. It's also in our scene. And it also gives us a little tool to move around. If you go to the top left here, you have other tools like rotate, scale, things like that are really useful. And if you saw what I was clicking through over here in the inspector, a bunch of different stuff came up here. And you don't have to worry about every little thing. I don't even know what every little thing does. But as you go on, you'll start to learn about all these different things. Don't get too overwhelmed, because it is a lot, and it's overwhelming, and it gets complicated really quick. So just kind of hang in there, and the more you use Unity and you use the editor and things like that, things will come a lot easier. So don't stress about it. But yeah, as you on our main camera, we have a transform. Every object has a transform. That's just, its position, rotation, scale. Exactly what's right here. And that's all it is. And then the directional light has a light object, makes light. And these little check boxes, we can actually uncheck those, and then it won't make any light. Obviously, the skybox is still staying the same, but if we actually disable the whole directional light, it'll disable both of these. So yeah, and then this is the default skybox is what it's called, is the outside, and we're gonna replace that in a bit. So it does look a little weird when there's no light, but that's not too big of a deal. But yeah, and on our cube, we have a mesh filter and a mesh render. So these two right here are what help you actually see the cube, transform obviously where it is, and then the collider is how we deal with physics and things like that. So that's like the actual. If we didn't have this, it wouldn't really be a box. It'd just be a rendered object, basically. Oh. But yeah, so that's these three windows. If we click the game view, this is what the game looks like when we start. This is actually what we'll play. If you click the play button up here, nothing's going to happen, but we will go in the game view. That's where you actually play the game. Asset store, this will be using to get the assets we want, the tables. There's a bunch of paid assets, a bunch of really, really great assets. If we type in table, you can scroll down here and you can bring the pricing all the way down. Then you can find some free tables and stuff. But yeah, so that's very useful if you just want to prototype stuff like we'll be doing. But yeah, and then you can just right click and click close window or close tab to get rid of it. Down here is our project and our console. So the project is gonna have all of our assets. So and just like it says in the assets folder. So anything that is in our game will be in the assets, any scripts, any objects, anything like that. And here we have scenes, and a scene in Unity is just like a level. So say we have this, I'm just gonna click Control D to make a couple of new cubes, and then I'll just click Control S to save this scene. And we're in sample scene right now. It says it right there. We click File and then New Scene. This is actually a new level, and we can make a new object, make another one, save it. This will be, I'll say scene 2. I just click Control S again, save it in the scenes folder. Anyway, this is our second scene here. So we have scene 2, we have sample scene. This is our first scene, and so we can switch back and forth between these levels. And actually, in code, we can switch in between the both levels, which is really useful because then we can set up different levels really easily. But we'll get into that later. Oh. But yeah, for now we can just delete that scene just by right clicking and click delete. But yeah, so that's the basics to the editor. Oh, and then the console, this will be for when we code. It'll give us our errors, give us our debug statements, and I'll get into all that later. So don't worry about that right now, but just know console is important. I always have it open. In this tutorial, this first tutorial, I'm going to show you guys just a basic movement system with the player, and then we'll go from there in the next couple tutorials. I won't keep this one too long. But yeah, so what I like to do is I like to rearrange this window. I don't like the default one. I like doing the default one when I'm doing level editing because you get this big scene view. It's kind of nice. But if you come up here to the top right and you click on the default, you can usually switch between these preset ones they have. Normal, I don't think. Yeah, normal is one that I preset. You can save a layout, delete a layout, and things like that. Normal is the one. This is the one that I use, so I saved it. But if you go to force split, I guess it's not force split. Yeah, if you go to tall, this is basically the one I use. I just grab the game view, and then you can just snap it down here at the bottom. And then I also just add a console. You click add tab, and then I guess console's not over here. If you don't see what you want over here, you can go up to window, and then general, and there's console. And then I can just snap this on. Oh, snap this on over here. But yeah, there's lots of different windows in here. Rendering, we have the lighting settings. This is really the one that you'll use, I think, the most. And like going through these lists, other than the general ones. Lighting settings. There's lots of different things in here. We can edit the skybox actually. And what I'm going to do real quick is if you just click on the little eye, or you can drag them in if you have one. But I'm going to actually set this one to none. So you get this little window of all the materials in your assets. And these are just the ones that Unity has built in. If we go all the way up top, we can click none. And that just makes the lighting look a little better. So I like to do that. But yeah, so that's just the basics. Again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry about it. We're going to be using all this stuff a lot, so yeah, you'll get the hang of it eventually. But yeah, so if we go into sample scene, we're going to go ahead and set up our scene here. So what I'll do is I'll delete these two cubes. I just click the delete key. And then on this one cube, I'll make sure it's reset. You can either like type in zeros for everything, or you can actually click this and click reset, and I'll put it at 0, 0, 0. And then I like to make my ground out of a cube, just so it has a little bit of a thickness. If you're dealing with physics and gravity and things like that, you might glitch through really thin objects, so something like a plane. You might end up actually glitching through, and a plane is just seeable from one side. So, yeah, I like to use a cube, a little bit of thickness. It really doesn't matter. You can do either one. But then over here on scale, I'll just make the scale 30 by 30. And then on the Y, I'll just make it like 0.1. So, still has a little bit of thickness. If you scroll in here, I'm just using the scroll wheel and then the left mouse, or right mouse button, sorry. And so you still got a little bit of thickness. But yeah. And then what we can do is we can add a 3D object and add a capsule. And this will be our player. And we can actually rename it up here as player. Like that. And then I'm going to reset this one as well. And then just drag them up a bit. Just like that. Alright, and now we can actually start coding a little bit and coding our player. So yeah, what you can do is come down here, right click, create, and then we can create a C# script. We'll be using C#. Unity used to have support for their own language, JavaScript, and Boo, but not anymore. You still can, from what I've heard, but really you just want to use C#. It's your best option. So we just click that. We can name it. You're gonna want to make sure you get your spelling right, otherwise you have to go through and actually change a couple other things. So yeah, just kind of try to name it right the first time. But yeah, you double click it, it'll open in Visual Studios, open up on a different monitor for me. But here's what you get when you first open it up. And there's a lot of things here. So if this first time coding, you just open it up, don't work too much yet. But I'll walk through a little bit. Basically up here, we're saying using system.collections. This allows us to use a lot of different functions and things like that we'll get into later. And then using Unity Engine, that's just so we can actually use this with Unity. And then class player script. Again, if you wanted to rename your script, you have to rename it here in the class and in here. So yeah, the class is just the script. And then right here we have these little 2 slashes, which means it's a comment. So this isn't actually code; it's just text, and it's a start called before the first frame update. The start calls at the very beginning, and then update is called once per frame. So this will be happening while a game is going, and this is happening at the very beginning. Okay, hold on. I forgot to mention that anything that happens between these two curly braces is gonna be a part of that code. So if we say update, we want this to happen every single frame. Anything that we put in between these two curly braces is gonna happen every single frame. I go into more detail with this later, but I wanted to get that out of the way right up front so you guys aren't confused about that. But yeah, anyway, back to the video. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these lines. Just like that, and then Control S. I'm always saving. I'm always doing Control S when I'm typing stuff out. So, yeah. So these are actually called functions, and I'll actually go into a detailed description of functions in just a minute. But basically, we have start and we have update. So how do we get started with coding movement? What we're gonna do is we're gonna code a movement moving up, down, left, right. So how do we do that exactly? What I'm going to make my variables. I always put my variables up here. The first variable we're going to want is a speed variable. All right, so I'm just going to type it out. This is what a variable looks like. What you want to do is you say a variable is just a value. It's just something that holds a value, right? So just like in math, we'd say x equals, nope, not that, x, we would say x, okay. And sometimes the auto filling can be a little annoying. We want to say x equals 5, right? And then we put this in the equation, we say x divided by 5, which would equal 1. And this is the same concept, right? And we're saying x equals 5, and then we'll just put 5 in for the x, because that's what we said x equals, just like in math. And we're doing the same thing here, but obviously it's a little more complicated. First of all, we define it as public or private. Now, if you make it public, if you want to access this variable in a different script, so say you have a health. Let's do that first. Public int health equals 5. So integer. This is where we actually define the variable, what type it is. So if it's an integer, just like in math, it's a whole number. So we can't put a decimal here. It will get mad at us. Yeah, it'll get mad at us. Cannot double the int, and I'll explain that in a second. But basically, when I say public, say you have an enemy, and when you run into the enemy, you want to remove some health from the player, but you want to remove the health in the enemy script. You want to detect the player from the enemy script. You'll have to have this public if you want to change the health from the enemy script. If you don't put anything, you won't be able to access it from any other script or anything like that. Or if you make it private, it's the same deal. I usually always put either public or private. Leaving it as this is not great practice in C#, so. Or at least from what I have learned. So I always either put public or private. Again, we'll put the speed. This is the speed at which our player will move, and I'll make it public speed y. Oh, I'll make it an integer speed equals 5. Now, the reason why I'm making this public is because public does two things. Not only can you access it from another script, but it also shows up in the inspector. So if I actually click the player, and you can either drag this on the player, or you can add and then search for it. Player script. So I'll just click that. As you can see, it shows up in the inspector. If I were to come back here and change this to private, save it, come back in here, I see it'll go away. So there's a couple ways around that, but usually I'll just make it public just so I can easily see it in the inspector, just like that. And then we can edit it in our game while we're playing and testing, which is really helpful. So there's nothing we need to do on start right now. I'm going to go ahead and just remove that. The only thing we want to do is on update, we want to be moving the player. Okay guys, I'm actually going to cut this video a little bit short. It was getting to be around 45 minutes, so I'm actually split this into 2 different parts. And the next part, we'll actually get the player moving and interacting with the WASD keys. And that should be up the day after this one's uploaded. So make sure to check that one out. If you had any questions at all, make sure to let me know so I can answer them for you guys. And yeah, I think that's about it. So I'll see you guys in the next one.